Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Today it's time to have a look at another devblog for updates 1.95, and along with all of the Swedish aviation tech tree, we're also going to get some pre-order vehicles for the ground side of things. And the first one of those pre-order vehicles is the Strv 1030. This is, of course, a tank that a lot of people have been looking forward to, as I know it's the cheese wedge, and it is, of course, a turretless tank. It is one of those machines which relies on its suspension in the form of hydropneumatic to move around the gun itself, since it's in a completely fixed position. That means that the gun doesn't move unless the whole tank moves, which is definitely something which is really fun. This idea was definitely tested when they brought in the VT-12 into the game in a slightly different manner, but also you could see the building blocks were there for stuff like the Strv 103. It is, as I said, coming in as a pre-order right now, and also the full ground tech tree will not be available in updates at 1.95. Instead, what we're going to see is just some pre-order vehicles, kind of like what we saw in update 1.93 for the aviation, and with the hope in 2020 that at some point we get, of course, the Swedish ground boys in. This is going to be a premium rank 5 Swedish main battle tank, and the history of it is definitely interesting because, well, as you can see, it is completely different to many other designs which surround it. If you look at designs from France, Germany, Britain, even the Soviets, everything relied on this turreted idea, where of course the Swedish threw balls to the wall and went completely the opposite way. So after World War II, Sweden was looking to replace the Centurion tanks that it had in service of its army. And by 1956, a man or an engineer named Sven Berg had come up with a decent tank design. The new design featured the turretless design and a cannon fixed in the hull. This would be trained onto its targets with the precise use of an adjustable suspension system, and the design was based on results from a study of tank crew casualties during World War II and the Korean War, which showed a correlation between tank height and hit probability. So the idea was trying to emphasize crew survivability and also tank survivability overall, so a lower profile was a hell of a lot better. So the S-Tank came along with incredibly small dimensions and a low profile, and it also utilized the new engineering solutions such as a mixed power plant consisting of a diesel engine and a gas turbine. This was actually the first MBT to really ever use a gas turbine engine, which is really cool. And by 1959, so about 3 years after the initial new tank design, the Swedish government approved the construction and testing of 2 prototypes, and in 1960, a pre-production of 10 vehicles of the Zero series was ordered for field trials. So this is technically a pre-production premium that we're getting. So, and in the comments down below, actually one of the administrators, Stoner, does say that there will of course be 103s in the proper Swedish tech trees. So if you're worried about that the Strv is only going to be a, premium vehicle, that's not the case. There's going to be other versions which are in the tech tree, and which is great, obviously. And when into the mid-60s, with obviously the testing, the test results, the vehicle was formally ordered into production and procured as the Stridsvagn 103. And obviously the idea was to replace the Centurions in the first place in the Centurion army, but it actually served alongside them in the end for a number of decades. It was eventually decommissioned in the 1990s, and by that time there was 290 103s built, spanning over 5 separate variants. I'll be very surprised if we don't see all 5, or at least 3 or 4 of those amount of vehicles. vehicles. So the STRV will come in, as I said, updates 1.95. One of the things to also mention about this vehicle when we have a look at it, and also the patch itself, the update has been named. It was named yesterday, but I just didn't talk about it. It's going to be called Northern Wind, which I think if we compare it to the last few update names, it's quite a nice one. You know, it's a beautiful, nice little name, very relaxed, and also tells you what's going on in the updates. Now, the main thing to understand is the gun is very key to the success of this vehicle that you see before you. The gun itself is a L74 Bofors 105mm. It's very, very similar to the L7 cannon, the 105 that you'll be used to, which is used on stuff like the Leopard, obviously the Centurion Mark 10, and other vehicles in kind of license forms such as the M60. But in compared to all those vehicles, the major difference is that this is supported by an auto-loading system. The crew of the STRV overall is a 3-man crew. You've got a driver gunner in the front, you've got you've got a driver also in the back who also operates as a radio man, and then you've got the commander in the center. So you've got this 3-man crew on top of the auto-loading system, and the auto-loading system means that this 105mm can fire every 4 seconds. It's going to be churning out those rounds, firing at pretty much anything and everything that it can lay its eyes on. It's able to fire a wide assortment of subcaliber and chemical rounds, which are typical for the 105mm NATO arsenal. The only, I suppose, question when it comes to this gun, since this was a pre-production one, is it going to get APFS-DS, or will it be stuck with stuff like APDS, AP, and also HeatFS? For me, I doubt this thing will get APFS FFVS because I see this being around a 7.7 vehicle or even a little bit lower, so I'd be kind of surprised if it does, but anything is possible nowadays with the crazy rounds that some of these vehicles can get. The other thing to also mention is that it does have 2 guns on it, which is kind of interesting. It has 2 fixed 7.62mm coaxial machine guns, and you can actually see them in this picture here on the right hand side. I'm not sure how much use they're going to be. You know, obviously they're not going to be great in the good old anti-air role, but maybe gunning down a specific, you know, lighter vehicle, it might happen, but I think overall, you know, it's not going to be that useful. The other strength of this vehicle is, as we talked about, the multi-engine design. It has 2 separate engines. You have a 240 horsepower diesel engine and a 300 horsepower gas turbine. These provide different power to different systems depending on the circumstances. So I'm wondering if we're going to have a system where if one is knocked out, you'll still be able to do some of the jobs of the other one, or if they are going to be, you know, tied together, so if one is knocked out, everything falls apart. The fact is that with these 2 separate engines, the acceleration on the machine probably won't be the best, but the top speed is nice. It can go up to 50 kilometers an hour, and also 44 kilometers an hour in reverse. So with this turretless machine, you're probably going to have to reposition a decent amount because obviously the ever-changing map in War Thunder, you've got to make sure that a lot of the time you are keeping up with the battle, and 44 kilometers an hour in reverse is wonderful. I've really enjoyed a lot of the French vehicles, stuff like the Char 25T, which of course has an insane reverse, just like it does forward, and it's nice to see the STRV will have something similar. Now, as I said, the crew is also a very interesting part. It's going to be set up in, you know, the crew of 3. So the fact is, in every vehicle in War Thunder, if you have a vehicle which is like this, you end up in a situation where once 2 crew members are knocked out of your 3, in realistic battles, you are dead. There is nothing that you can do, and you are just gone out of the battlefield, and your crew is knocked out. The STRV is going to be different. It's actually going to be able to be operated by 1 person. overall. So you have to make sure to kill all of the crew members if you're killing this machine by knocking out all of the crew. It's going to have also a unique little mechanic in it when it comes to the commander's position, and I'll just read it verbatim for you here. When the driver gunner is knocked out, the tank loses its ability to move and shoot, but only temporarily, as the commander is able to take control much faster than other tanks since the commander doesn't actually need to change seats. The coolest thing with the Strv-103 is that it is the first and only tank in War Thunder able to move and shoot while having only one crew member alive. So the survivability of this is obviously through the roof. It has the really good angled armor, meaning that it'll be great against stuff like APFS DS and also AP DS and even AP. Probably going to struggle a little bit against stuff like Heat FS, but we're going to have to test it when it comes to the dev server. But the main thing is, if you're going plinky plonky trying to take out all of the crew members, it's just going to be so annoying to deal with, because obviously it's just not going to work too well for you. Imagine those stock grinds where you're playing something like an STB-1 or a Centurion Mark III, and you've got that APDS, and you know, you're trying to penetrate this thing and it's just laughing in your face. I'm sure it'll have weak spots on the front of it. You know, the cannon breech definitely looks juicy, and also that port for where I believe the driver's, you know, optics are is going to be juicy as well. So you can definitely smash up that. The only other thing as well is it will obviously have limited maneuverability when you only have one crew member, but because it's auto-loaded, you never have to worry about the reload failing you. It will always be able to fire on those 4-second intervals. So it'll be interesting to see if it has the first stage ammo rack idea or not. If it does, then of course you're going to have to be wary of that, and if it doesn't, well, you know, you get a nice little added bonus on top of everything else. So yeah, this vehicle is looking like a wonderful machine, and we'll just take a look at the pre-order package that it has as well. This is, of course, as we said, the Strv-103, and what it is $49.99 right now, and you obviously get 2,000 Golden Eagles, premium account for 15 days. That normally equates to about $15. So this tank in itself is $30. You also get this really cool Thor decal, which is one of the coolest ones that I've personally seen in a while, and also the God of Thunder title. I think that might also be one of my favorite titles that I've seen in War Thunder in an incredibly long time. So yeah, it's just looking wonderful. It really is looking great. And just as a nice little tidbit of information as well, if you want some extra news just to kind of sink your teeth into, this is the other premium which is coming this update, which is the SAV 201248. And this thing can only fire HE, but it fires at a reload speed of 1.6 seconds. My God. It's going to be incredibly fun to use that thing. But the S-Tank is finally here. Now, the key thing for it is its armor. Because for me, at least when I think about it, the gun handling characteristics, it all really depends on the hull aiming mode, the one which the VT-12 has right now. And the problem with that hull aiming mode, in my opinion, is that it is not very, very good. It is not, it doesn't feel very good, and if you're on any sort of type of incline, then what happens with this vehicle is, or what happens with the VT, I should say, is you end up in a situation where it's trying to force you up the hill or down the hill. It never wants to stay still and get guns on target. So elevation is really tricky with the new system. So I'm really hoping that those problems do get sorted out when the STRV comes in. Otherwise, it's going to be a pain trying to get that gun on target and also staying in a position where you can effectively use this armor. Because the moment that you turn slightly away from your enemy, the moment that you expose those sides, those road wheels look mighty tasty, and you'll be able to just pen them straight through and annihilate this vehicle. It is all about the wedge. It is not really about anything else when it comes to its armor. It's going to get killed from the top a lot. I'm sure it's going to get bombed a hell of a lot. But because of the low silhouette and because of the angled armor, you are going to have a lot of situations where it's going to just take over parts of the battlefield. Whether it's going to be able to capitalize on those things once it's won the initial engagement, though, that is something we will have to see when it comes to the game. It'll be nice to also see later versions of the Strv-103 which have a little bit more protection against stuff like heat and also other rounds, which I'm sure we will see in the tech tree. But for now, I'm incredibly hyped for this machine just because it brings a new layer to War Thunder. It brings a new set of mechanics to War Thunder, it brings a new playstyle to War Thunder, and I want to see how it affects the meta. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd just like to thank Ambrosius McClellan, B. Young, Blackie, Daniel Stanton, Jay Wilt, John Ryman, Joseph Anders, Martinez, Moxie, Super Cacti, Uyins Terry, Elove Goat, and Seductive Trashcan for supporting the channel.